Welcome to Spinal Life Takeaways. These are bite-sized segments, jam-packed full of information delivered to you at home or on the road to give you a taste of what we can do for you. So let's dig in. So Patricia, if I wanted to get back behind a wheel of a car, how do I go about doing that?
Well, I think the critical things are to make sure that you have medical clearance, so that's a medical certificate that your treating doctor can fill out with you, and also to have a license or learner's permit.
So once those two critical things have been obtained, what role do you play as an occupational therapist in getting back to driving?
So the doctor would actually put in the medical certificate if they want to have more information about the sort of driving modifications that their client would need. So I actually organise for 2 sessions with the client. One would be an off-road assessment. The next thing we would do is actually get you behind the wheel. So the way we make sure that we select a vehicle that's modified with the right modifications to meet your needs would be analysing all of the results from the off-road assessment, which would mean that we select the appropriate steering aid, we select the appropriate hand controls, and we can also consider how you will be travelling in the car.
Excellent. So breaking down all of those different areas where someone may find it may be a little bit more difficult to drive and really sort of take...
Yeah, we have to consider the whole of task. So not just access to the primary controls, meaning the brake, the accelerator and the steering wheel, but also how are you going to access the indicators? How will you be positioned behind the wheel? Are you occupying a car seat? Are you occupying your power chair? Or how will you transport your manual wheelchair? They're all things that we need to consider as part of the driving process.
So when you were talking about off-road assessment, is that done in a vehicle?
No, I know the term can be a bit misleading. It's actually a pre-drive screening. So essentially that happens at the clinic. We organise an appointment here at Spinal Life, or we can come to your home, and essentially we do a full screen from head to toe. Work out what physical function you've got available, work out your grasp, work out trunk control and range in your neck, because these are all movements that would be needed behind the wheel.
Say you were driving,
Yep.
and you needed to do a left-hand turn.
Yep, let's put it around there.
Yep. And then, so you kind of hook
Yep.
as opposed to fully.
Yep.
So it's kind of like your version of palming the wheel.
Yep.
Yep. And what if you had to come up and over to do a right? Yep. Okay.
And we also assess vision to make sure that there's no issues in terms of perceiving cars or there's any issues with peripheral vision, and cognition. We make sure we actually screen for those.
You will see images of an intersection. There will be a changing number of people and vehicles on the intersection. You will see these objects for 4 seconds after the countdown. The objects will then disappear. Try to remember which objects you saw, where they were located, and which way they were heading.
So when we report back to the doctor, nothing gets missed and he can make a decision as to whether to endorse the request for licensing conditions.
So when it comes to the on-road component, what does that look like?
The on-road component's actually the fun part. That's where you actually get to try the hand controls or vehicle modifications. It requires a few more people, so it means that it's the client, obviously, they're going to be the ones behind the wheel, but it might be the first time driving with those particular modifications, so therefore we need a driving instructor that can actually intervene should there be a need for it. And then there's us, the driver trained OT. Our role is to actually assess the suitability of the driving modifications.
So making sure that the hand controls are working properly, or that maybe they might need a bit more sort of lateral support, or
That's right.
The seatbelt's okay.
Yeah, so we assess the whole of task, making sure that they can apply the seatbelt, that they can change gears, that they can turn the car on and off. That's all part of the driving task. It's not just actually braking and accelerating. It's actually making sure the steering and control of the car is appropriate, the gap selection is appropriate. And because there's so many things that the person needs to consider. It might be the first time they sat behind the wheel, or there might be a returning driver. That's why we need to have a driving instructor as well in the picture to make sure that everyone's safe.
Okay, so once all of those components have been assessed, what happens then? So I know that the different requirements that I need to be able to drive the car. What happens after that's done?
So essentially the on-road assessment is a proof concept. We're trying to work out that you have the capacity to learn to master the new driving controls. Lessons are required, typically, to make sure that you are meeting Department of Transport standards. Driving with hand controls is different than driving with foot pedals. Steering with a steering aid, it's different to steering with two hands. So making sure that we can have you linked up with a driving instructor that can provide lessons to address your level of skill and build up on it to make sure you can achieve and get back on the road.
So once the client gets the hang of using all of these new controls and the occupational therapist is happy with how everything's going and the driver trainer thinks that they're competent on the road again, is that all that happens? What happens from there?
So we actually go on road for the final lesson, and that's the only way we can actually provide the evidence to a doctor. Requesting permanent licensing conditions, so we can actually say to them, client has mastered the safe use of the hand controls and the steering aid. We would like to request for them to actually have a new license with these conditions, meaning that they have all the foot pedals modified for hand controls and have the steering aid. So they go on the license, the doctor gets the full report, which includes the findings from the pre-drive, or meaning the off-road, and the on-road assessment all gets presented to them. They review that with you in person, and then they make the final decision as to whether they will update the certificate.
Okay. So when it comes to driving, the journey can be a little bit different between someone who's been licensed or not licensed before. So someone who's not actually had a license, what would they do?
The same as everyone else. You still have to actually keep a logbook, make sure that you do your practice, supervised practice, and you actually sit an exam with Department of Transport. You need to actually have that to say that you have passed and meet Department of Transport standards for driving. All of that information goes to the report that your doctor reviews and make sure that then your medical certificate's updated to match the conditions on your license. And then for someone that's actually previously driven, you don't need to be reassessed by the Department of Transport, but you do need to have a final assessment with the driving instructor and myself. And then that information gets fed back to the doctor.
So it all comes back to the doctor?
Yeah, the doctor closes that loop.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. So when it comes to getting back on the road, do we have to get our car modified?
Yes, if you haven't got preserved motor function that allows you to operate the standard foot pedals, then we look at modifications. So modifications can be classified into primary and secondary modifications. Primary meaning anything that controls the brake, the accelerator, the steering wheel. Secondary would be headlights, indicators, the horn, the ignition. Primary modifications are really critical to the operation of the car. So it can vary really. Some of it might be simple like the steering aid, some of it might be full electronic hand controls.
And are there funding for that?
For modifications, that's where we come in. We actually put in funding requests on your behalf for whatever's required and has been assessed on the road as safe and reliable for you to be able to operate the car and control the car safely. In terms of vehicles, unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do for vehicle purchase. There's no state-based or federal scheme that will fund vehicle purchase.
Okay. So when it comes to getting back to driving, it sounds like there's a number of people involved. How do I get started?
You can reach us. Yeah, contact our customer engagement team. We have actually got a checklist that it's a nice way of actually making sure that you won't miss any of the information that we need to get you assessed for that initial consult.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. If you are looking at getting back behind the wheel and you're excited about driving, give our customer engagement team a call and we'll get you started.